The plane was at 30,000 feet when the sharp crack of a slap silenced the hum of conversation. 17-year-old Isaiah Carter, clutching a worn Bible, froze as the sting spread across his cheek. The flight attendant's eyes blazed with something: fear, anger, or both, while passengers gasped, their phones already recording. Isaiah's heart pounded, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he reached for his phone, dialed a single number, and spoke 3 words that would bring the entire flight to a halt. "This is enough." Isaiah Carter boarded Flight 237 from Atlanta to Chicago, with a weight on his shoulders heavier than the backpack slung over his arm. At 17, he was no stranger to scrutiny. Growing up black in a small Georgia town had taught him to navigate wary glances and whispered assumptions. But today was different. Today, he was heading to a national youth conference to speak about his faith, his Bible a constant companion, its pages dog-eared from years of study. The plane, a packed Boeing 737, buzzed with the usual chaos of boarding. Overhead bins slamming, passengers jostling for space, and the faint hum of engines warming up. Isaiah settled into his window seat 14A and opened his Bible to Psalm 23. The words were a balm, steadying him for the speech he'd deliver tomorrow. He barely noticed the flight attendant, a woman in her 30s with sharp cheekbones and a name tag reading Karen, until she paused by his row. "Sir, you'll need to put that away during takeoff," she said, her tone clipped, eyes lingering on the Bible. Isaiah glanced up, confused. "It's just a book. I'll close it when we're in the air." Her lips tightened. "It's a safety issue. Stow it now." He nodded, slipping the Bible into his backpack, but the exchange left a sour taste. Something about her gaze, cold, almost accusing, set him on edge. He shook it off, focusing on the view outside as the plane taxied and lifted into the night sky. An hour into the flight, the cabin lights dimmed, and most passengers dozed or scrolled through screens. Isaiah, unable to sleep, pulled out his Bible again. The verses were his anchor, especially now, with the conference looming. He was halfway through John 16 when Karen appeared again, her cart rattling down the aisle. "Sir, I told you to put that away," she snapped, louder than necessary. Heads turned, Isaiah's brow furrowed. "We're not in takeoff anymore. I'm just reading." Her voice rose, sharp and brittle. "It's distracting, and it's making people uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" Isaiah's voice was calm, but firm. "It's a Bible. I'm not bothering anyone." A man in the aisle seat, a middle-aged businessman with a loosened tie, leaned forward. "He's just reading, ma'am. Let it go." Karen's face reddened. "This is my cabin, and I decide what's appropriate. Put it away, or I'll have you removed." Isaiah's jaw tightened. Removed? They were 30,000 feet in the air. He closed the Bible, holding it in his lap, but her words lit a spark of defiance. "I'm not breaking any rules. You can't tell me I can't read my Bible." The argument escalated in seconds. Karen leaned closer, her voice a hiss. "You don't get to talk back to me, kid." Before Isaiah could respond, her hand shot out, striking his cheek with a force that echoed through the cabin. Gasps rippled around them. A woman across the aisle fumbled for her phone, recording. The businessman stood, shouting, "What the hell was that?" Isaiah's face burned, but he didn't move. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Stay steady, son. Don't give them a reason to twist your story." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and dialed a number he'd memorized for emergencies. His mentor, Pastor James, picked up on the second ring. "Pastor," Isaiah said, his voice low but clear, "this is enough." Pastor James Williamson was no ordinary preacher. A former civil rights attorney, he'd built a network that spanned activists, lawyers, and media outlets. When Isaiah's call came through, he was in his Chicago hotel room, preparing for the same youth conference. Isaiah's 3 words told him everything. Something had gone wrong, and it was serious. "Tell me exactly what happened," James said, already opening his laptop. Isaiah recounted the incident in a steady voice, though his hands trembled. The slap, the Bible, the flight attendant's aggression. It poured out as passengers around him whispered and filmed. Karen, realizing the attention, stormed to the front of the plane, barking orders to another attendant. James didn't hesitate. "Stay calm, Isaiah. Keep your phone on. I'm making calls." Within minutes, James had alerted his contacts. A civil rights lawyer in Chicago, a journalist at a major outlet, and a friend at the FAA. The lawyer advised grounding the plane to ensure Isaiah's safety and to preserve evidence. The journalist began drafting a breaking story. The FAA contact, citing a potential onboard incident involving crew misconduct, relayed an order to air traffic control. Flight 237 was to divert to the nearest airport, St. Louis. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to an onboard situation, we'll be making an unscheduled landing in St. Louis. Please remain seated." Murmurs erupted. Karen's face paled as she conferred with the captain in the galley. Isaiah sat still, his Bible now back in his hands, his thumb tracing the leather cover. The businessman beside him leaned over. "Kid, you okay?" That was way out of line. Isaiah nodded. "I'm fine, just didn't expect this." The plane landed in St. Louis at 11:47 p.m., met by airport police and federal agents. Passengers were instructed to remain seated as two officers boarded, heading straight for Isaiah. Karen, now flanked by a senior flight attendant, pointed at him, her voice shrill. "He was disruptive! He refused to follow instructions!" Businessman stood again. "That's a lie. She slapped him for no reason. I saw it. We all did." He gestured to the passengers, several of whom held up phones, videos ready. One officer, a woman with a calm demeanor, knelt beside Isaiah. "Son, can you tell us what happened?" Isaiah recounted the incident again, his voice steady but his eyes burning with restrained anger. The officer nodded, then turned to Karen. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." The plane was grounded for hours as authorities interviewed passengers and crew. Videos of the incident spread online, sparking outrage. By morning, "Justice for Isaiah" was trending on X, with thousands sharing clips and demanding accountability. The airline issued a statement, suspending Karen pending investigation, but the damage was done. Pastor James arrived in St. Louis by dawn, meeting Isaiah at the airport with a lawyer in tow. "You did the right thing," James told him, his hand on Isaiah's shoulder. "You stayed steady." The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Angela Brooks, was already building a case. "This isn't just about one flight attendant," she said. "It's about systemic bias. We'll make sure this doesn't get swept under the rug." Isaiah's speech at the youth conference, rescheduled for the next day, became a rallying cry. He stood before a packed auditorium, his Bible in hand, and spoke not just of faith but of resilience. "They tried to silence me," he said, his voice carrying a quiet power. "But I know who I am, and I know who's got my back." Weeks later, the investigation concluded. Karen was fired, and the airline settled with Isaiah's family, funding a scholarship for young activists in his name. The incident sparked a broader conversation about racial bias in air travel, with new training protocols rolled out across the industry. Isaiah, though shaken, emerged stronger, his faith unshaken. He kept the Bible close, its pages now marked with a new verse, written in his own hand. "Though I walk through the valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." Isaiah Carter stepped off the stage in Chicago, the applause still ringing in his ears. The youth conference had been a whirlwind, his speech shared across platforms, from X to news outlets worldwide. At 17, he'd become a symbol of resistance, his face, calm but resolute, clutching his Bible, plastered on screens and articles. The scholarship in his name was a victory, but the weight of attention felt heavier than the slap that started it all. Back home in Georgia, life didn't slow down. Reporters camped outside his family's modest brick house, their cameras flashing, as Isaiah left for school. His mother, Tanya, a nurse who worked double shifts, tried to shield him, but the world had latched onto her son. "You don't owe them your story," she told him one evening, her hands kneading dough for cornbread. "You choose what you share." Isaiah nodded, but the choice wasn't simple. Pastor James and Angela Brooks, the lawyer, urged him to keep speaking. "Your voice matters," James said during a strategy call. "This isn't just about you, it's about every kid who's been profiled, dismissed, or worse." The airline incident had sparked lawsuits and policy changes, but Isaiah felt the real fight was just beginning. Online, "Justice for Isaiah" mixed with hate comments, some calling him a troublemaker, others worse. He read them late at night, the words clawing at his resolve. His Bible, now a talisman of sorts, stayed open on his desk, its pages a refuge. A month later, An email arrived from the National Civil Rights Alliance, inviting Isaiah to speak at their annual gala in Washington, D.C. The event would draw activists, politicians, and media, a platform to amplify his message. Tanya was hesitant. "You're still a kid, Isaiah. This is a lot." "I know, Mama," he said. "But if I stop now, what was it all for?" She sighed, her eyes soft with pride and worry. "Then we go together." The flight to D.C. was tense. Isaiah boarded with his Bible tucked into his jacket, his eyes scanning the crew. The flight attendants were polite, overly so, their smiles tight. Passengers whispered, some recognizing him. A girl his age, seated across the aisle, leaned over. "You're that Bible kid, right? That was brave," Isaiah managed. A smile. "Just doing what I had to." In D.C., the gala was a sea of suits and sparkling dresses, held in a grand hotel ballroom. Isaiah, in a borrowed blazer, felt out of place until Angela introduced him to Lena Carter, no relation, a veteran activist with gray braids and a voice like thunder. "You've got fire, young man," she said. "But fire burns out if you don't pace yourself." Her words stuck with him as he took the stage that night. He spoke of the plane, the slap, and the call that grounded it, but also of the bigger picture, the stares he'd faced his whole life, the assumptions that followed him like shadows. "Faith taught me to stand tall," he said, holding up his Bible. "But justice, that's what we build together." The crowd stood, clapping, but Isaiah's eyes caught a man in the back, his face hard, staring too long. Something about him, maybe the way his hand lingered in his pocket, set Isaiah's nerves on edge. After the gala, Isaiah and Tanya stayed in D.C. for a follow-up meeting with the Alliance. As they left their hotel the next morning, a man approached, tall, in a dark coat, his voice low. "You're stirring trouble, kid. Some folks don't like that." Tanya stepped between them. "Back off." The man smirked and vanished into the crowd. Isaiah's heart raced, but he kept his face steady. Tanya called Angela, who arranged private security for the rest of their trip. "This is what happens when you challenge the system," Angela said grimly. "You become a target." Back in Georgia, the threats escalated. Anonymous letters arrived at their home, some with slurs, others with vague warnings. One night, a brick shattered their living room window, a note tied to it. "Stop talking or else." Tanya wanted to pull Isaiah from the spotlight, but he refused. "They want me scared, Mama. I'm not giving them that." Pastor James rallied the community, organizing protection for the Carters. Neighbors took shifts watching the house, and the church held prayer vigils. Isaiah, meanwhile, worked with Angela to trace the threats. They led to a small but vocal group tied to the airline's labor disputes, angry at the reforms sparked by Isaiah's case. One name kept surfacing: Mark Heller, a former airline supervisor with a grudge. Angela's team tracked Heller to a rally in Atlanta, where he was spreading lies about Isaiah, claiming the teen had provoked the incident to scam the airline. Isaiah, against Tanya's wishes, insisted on attending. "I need to face this," he told her. "Not just for me, for everyone they're trying to silence." At the rally, a tense crowd gathered outside a community center. Heller, a burly man with a megaphone, ranted about entitled kids and fake victims. Isaiah stepped forward, Bible in hand, his voice cutting through the noise. "You don't know me," he said, eyes locked on Heller. "But I know what you're doing. You're scared because people are listening to me." The crowd hushed. Heller faltered, then sneered. "You're a kid with a book. You don't scare me." "Then why send threats?" Isaiah shot back. He held up his phone, playing a recording Angela's team had uncovered. A voicemail from Heller to an accomplice, plotting to intimidate the Carters. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heller's face drained of color as police, tipped off by Angela, moved in to detain him. Heller's arrest made headlines, and the threats stopped. Isaiah's story grew, inspiring a wave of youth activism. The scholarship in his name funded dozens of students, and he began mentoring others, sharing his Bible's lessons alongside strategies for change. Tanya, though still protective, saw her son's strength and let him soar. One evening, as they sat on their porch, Isaiah flipped to a new page in his Bible, writing, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled." He looked at his mother. "This isn't the end, is it?" She smiled, her eyes glistening. "No, son. It's just the beginning." Isaiah Carter, now 18, stood at the edge of a community center stage in Atlanta, his Bible tucked under his arm. The room buzzed with young faces. Teens from across the state gathered for the first meeting of the Carter Scholars Network, the program funded by the airline settlement. Isaiah had envisioned this as a space for mentorship, where kids like him could learn to navigate a world that often judged them before they spoke. But tonight, his mind was elsewhere. A week earlier, Pastor James had received a tip. A network of online groups, emboldened by Mark Heller's rhetoric, was targeting youth activists like Isaiah. They weren't just trolls. They were organized, using encrypted platforms to coordinate harassment campaigns. The tip came from a hacker named Zara, a former Carter scholar who'd gone rogue after her own run-in with racial profiling. She'd reached out to James, warning that Isaiah was their next target. "You're not just a kid anymore," Zara told Isaiah over a secure call. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "You're a symbol. That makes you dangerous to them, and a threat to us if you don't act." Isaiah glanced at the teens in the room, their eyes bright with hope. He couldn't let them down. "What do I need to do?" he asked Zara. "Expose them," she said. "But it's risky. They've got people in high places, cops, maybe even politicians. You'll need proof, and you'll need to move fast." Zara arranged a meeting in a nondescript coffee shop on the outskirts of Atlanta. Isaiah arrived with Tanya, who insisted on coming despite his protests. "You're still my son," she said, her nurse's scrubs swapped for a jacket and jeans. "I'm not letting you walk into this alone." Zara was waiting in a corner booth, her laptop open, her hoodie obscuring half her face. She was barely 20, with a quick smile that didn't match the intensity in her eyes. "This isn't just about you," she said, sliding a USB drive across the table. "It's about all of us. Black kids, queer kids, anyone they think they can silence." The USB contained leaked chats from the group, screenshots of plans to dox activists, flood their socials with hate, and worse, sabotage their futures with fake criminal records. Isaiah's name appeared repeatedly, alongside words like neutralize and discredit. His stomach churned, but his resolve hardened. "How do we stop them?" he asked. Zara leaned forward. "We go public, but not yet. We need more. Names, faces, connections. I can get you into their server, but you'll have to play a role. Pretend you're one of them." Tanya's hand gripped his arm. "Absolutely not. That's too dangerous." Isaiah met her eyes. "Mama, if I don't, who will? These kids," he gestured toward the community center in his mind. "They're counting on me." With Zara's help, Isaiah created a fake online persona. Jay, a disgruntled teen who claimed to resent woke activism. Using a burner account, he joined the group's server, his heart pounding as he typed his first message. The responses came fast, welcoming, but probing. They wanted details, loyalty tests. Zara coached him through it, feeding him just enough truth to blend in while keeping his identity hidden. For weeks, Isaiah played the part, logging chats late at night, his Bible open beside him for strength. The group's leaders, hiding behind pseudonyms like Patriot Shield and True Order, bragged about their reach, planted stories in local news, bribed officials, even hacked school records. One name stood out: Councilman Robert Vance, a local politician with a clean public image but private ties to the group's funding. Isaiah shared everything with Zara and Angela Brooks, who was now working pro bono to protect the Carter Scholars. Angela's eyes narrowed as she reviewed the evidence. "Vance is untouchable unless we have ironclad proof. We need a paper trail, financials, emails, something concrete." Zara smirked. "I'm on it. But Isaiah, you're gonna have to meet one of them in person. They're planning a recruitment event. It's your chance to get Vance on record." The recruitment event was a low-key gathering at a warehouse in rural Georgia, disguised as a community fundraiser. Isaiah arrived with a hidden recorder, his nerves electric. Tanya and Pastor James waited nearby in a rented car, ready to call Angela if things went south. Zara had hacked the warehouse's security cameras, giving her eyes on the scene. Inside, the crowd was small, mostly men, some in suits, others in casual gear that didn't hide their tension. Councilman Vance was there, shaking hands, his smile polished but cold. Isaiah, as Jay, kept his head down, blending in. When Vance approached, Isaiah played his role, venting about activist kids ruining the country. Vance nodded. leaning in. "You're one of us," Vance said, his voice low. "We're building something bigger than protests. A new order. Stick with us, and you'll see real change." Isaiah's recorder caught every word. He asked careful questions, drawing out details. Funding from shell companies, plans to target schools, even a scheme to frame activists for vandalism. Vance, confident in Jay's loyalty, spilled more than he should have. As Isaiah left, his phone buzzed, a text from Zara. "Got it all. Cameras too. You're clear." The evidence hit like a tidal wave. Angela and Zara leaked the recordings and financial records to a trusted journalist, who broke the story on a major news outlet. By morning, Vance's name was everywhere, his career in ruins. The group's server went dark as members scrambled to cover their tracks. But Zara had already archived everything. Arrests followed, dismantling the network. Isaiah, though, felt no triumph. The exposure brought more attention, more threats. He and Tanya moved temporarily to a safe house arranged by Angela, the Carter Scholars Program on hold until the dust settled. One night, as he sat with his Bible, Tanya joined him, her voice soft. "You're carrying too much, son." He looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. "It's worth it, Mama. For them." He thought of the kids at the community center, their dreams, their futures. She nodded, pulling him into a hug. "Then we keep going." Months later, the Carter Scholars Network relaunched, stronger than ever. Isaiah, now a college freshman studying political science, balanced classes with activism. The threats hadn't stopped entirely, but he'd learned to live with them, his faith in community a shield. At a scholarship ceremony, he spoke to a new group of teens, his Bible in hand. "You don't need to be fearless," he told them. "You just need to be faithful. To yourself, to each other, to what's right. That's enough to change the world." As he stepped down, a girl from the crowd approached, holding her own Bible. "I saw you on that plane," she said. "You gave me courage." Isaiah smiled, his heart full. "Then pass it on." Isaiah Carter sat in his dorm room at Morehouse College, the Atlanta skyline glowing faintly through his window. At 19, he was a sophomore, juggling classes, the Carter Scholars Network, and a growing platform as an activist. His Bible, now more worn than ever, lay open on his desk, its margins filled with notes from late-night reflections. The scholarship program had grown, with chapters in 3 states and dozens of teens mentored under his guidance. But success came with pressure, and Isaiah felt it like a storm brewing. A new email pinged on his laptop, an invitation from the Unity Coalition, a national organization pushing for racial and economic justice. They wanted Isaiah to lead a youth summit in Los Angeles, bringing together activists from across the country to address systemic bias in schools and workplaces. The offer was a dream, but it came with a catch. The summit was in 2 months, and Isaiah would need to secure funding, speakers, and a strategy to counter opposition from groups still bitter about his role in exposing Councilman Vance. Tanya, visiting for the weekend, read the email over his shoulder. "This is big, Isaiah," she said, her voice a mix of pride and caution. "But you're stretching yourself thin. You sure you're ready for this?" He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "I don't know, Mama. But if I say no, who's gonna step up? These kids need someone who gets it." She nodded, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Just promise me you'll lean on others. You don't have to carry this alone." Isaiah reached out to Zara, now a cybersecurity consultant for activist groups, and Pastor James, who'd become a father figure beyond the church. They agreed to help. But Zara brought news that tightened Isaiah's chest. "Those groups we took down? They're not gone," she said over a video call, her screen glowing with lines of code. "They've rebranded, gone deeper underground. And they're watching the summit. They see it as a threat." "What kind?" Isaiah asked, his voice steady despite the unease creeping in. "Disinformation mostly," Zara replied. "They're planning to flood X with fake stories, say the summit's a front for something shady. They've got bots ready and a few insiders in LA media. You'll need to be bulletproof." Pastor James, patched into the call, added, "We need allies on the ground. I know folks in LA. Churches, community leaders. They'll have your back." Isaiah spent the next weeks building a team. He recruited Aisha, a Carter scholar with a knack for social media strategy, to counter disinformation. He also connected with Miguel, an LA-based activist who'd faced similar harassment. Miguel's energy was infectious, but his stories of police surveillance in LA made Isaiah wary. "They don't like us organizing," Miguel warned. "You show up, they'll be watching." The summit was held in a community college auditorium in South Los Angeles, packed with over 500 young activists, their voices a chorus of hope and defiance. Isaiah opened the event, his Bible in hand, speaking of faith as a foundation for change. "We're not here to ask for a seat at the table," he said, his voice ringing clear. "We're here to build a new one." The crowd roared, but outside, trouble brewed. Protesters, some genuine, others suspiciously organized, gathered, holding signs accusing the summit of dividing the nation. Aisha monitored X, spotting bot accounts spreading lies, claims that Isaiah was paid by foreign groups, that the summit was inciting violence. She and Zara worked furiously, flagging fake posts and amplifying real voices from attendees. On the second day, a local news van arrived, its reporter pushing for an interview. Isaiah agreed, but the questions were sharp, laced with accusations. "Some say you're exploiting your story for fame," the reporter said, her eyes narrowing. "How do you respond?" Isaiah took a breath, his mother's words echoing. "Stay steady. I'm here because I was a kid on a plane, holding a Bible, and someone thought that was a threat. I'm here so no one else has to feel that way." The reporter faltered, and the crowd behind Isaiah cheered. The moment went viral, drowning out the bots. But that night, as he left the auditorium, a black SUV trailed him and Miguel to their hotel. Miguel noticed first. "That's not random," he whispered. "We need to move." Isaiah's heart pounded as they ducked into a side street, the SUV's headlights sweeping past. Miguel called a friend, who picked them up in an unmarked car. Back at the hotel, Zara hacked into traffic cams, identifying the SUV's plates as registered to a private security firm with ties to the same network Vance had funded. "They're not done with you," she said. "But I've got their digital fingerprints now." Angela Brooks flew to LA, filing an injunction against the firm for stalking. The summit continued, its momentum unstoppable. On the final day, Isaiah introduced a new initiative, the Unity Scholars Fund, a national extension of his program, aimed at training young leaders to combat bias and disinformation. He dedicated it to his mother, who watched from the front row, tears in her eyes. Back at Morehouse, Isaiah felt the weight of the summit's success and its costs. The threats hadn't stopped, and his grades were slipping under the strain. One night, alone in his dorm, he opened his Bible to Psalm 27. "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear?" He wrote in the margin, "For the kids who come after me." Aisha, now a close friend, stopped by with coffee. "You're doing too much," she said, echoing Tanya. "Let us carry some of this." Isaiah smiled, weary but determined. "I'm learning," he said, "but I'm not stopping." The next morning, he got a call from Miguel. A new group in LA wanted to join the Unity Scholars. "You started something, man," Miguel said. "It's bigger than you now." Isaiah looked out his window, the city waking under a soft dawn. He didn't have all the answers, but he had faith in God, in his people, in the fight. And that was enough. Isaiah Carter sat in his dorm room at Morehouse College, the Atlanta skyline glowing faintly through his window. At 19, he was a sophomore, juggling classes, the Carter Scholars Network, and a growing platform as an activist. His Bible, now more worn than ever, lay open on his desk, its margins filled with notes from late-night reflections. The scholarship program had grown with chapters in 3 states and dozens of teens mentored under his guidance. But success came with pressure, and Isaiah felt it like a storm brewing. A new email pinged on his laptop, an invitation from the Unity Coalition, a national organization pushing for racial and economic justice. They wanted Isaiah to lead a youth summit in Los Angeles, bringing together activists from across the country to address systemic bias in schools and workplaces. The offer was a dream, but it came with a catch. The summit was in 2 months, and Isaiah would need to secure funding, speakers, and a strategy to counter opposition from groups still bitter about his role in exposing Councilman Vance. Tanya, visiting for the weekend, read the email over his shoulder. "This is big, Isaiah," she said, her voice a mix of pride and caution. "But you're stretching yourself thin. You sure you're ready for this?" He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "I don't know, Mama." But if I say no, who's gonna? Step up. These kids need someone who gets it. She nodded, her hand resting on his shoulder. Just promise me you'll lean on others. You don't have to carry this alone. Isaiah reached out to Zara, now a cybersecurity consultant for activist groups, and Pastor James, who'd become a father figure beyond the church. They agreed to help. But Zara brought news that tightened Isaiah's chest. Those groups we took down? They're not gone, she said over a video call, her screen glowing with lines of code. They've rebranded, gone deeper underground. And they're watching the summit. They see it as a threat. What kind? Isaiah asked, his voice steady, despite the unease creeping in. Disinformation, mostly, Zara replied. They're planning to flood X with fake stories. Say the summit's a front for something shady. They've got bots. Ready, and a few insiders in LA media. You'll need to be bulletproof. Pastor James, patched into the call, added, We need allies on the ground. I know folks in LA. Churches, community leaders. They'll have your back. Isaiah spent the next weeks building a team. He recruited Aisha, a Carter scholar with a knack for social media strategy, to counter disinformation. He also connected with Miguel, an LA-based activist who'd faced similar harassment. Miguel's energy was infectious, but his stories of police surveillance in LA made Isaiah wary. They don't like us organizing, Miguel warned. You show up, they'll be watching. The summit was held in a community college auditorium in South Los Angeles, packed with over 500 young activists, their voices a chorus of hope and defiance. Isaiah opened the event, his Bible in hand, speaking of faith as a foundation for change. We're not here to ask for a seat at the table, he said, his voice ringing clear. We're here to build a new one. The crowd roared, but outside, trouble brewed. Protesters, some genuine, others suspiciously organized, gathered, holding signs accusing the summit of dividing the nation. Aisha monitored X, spotting bot accounts spreading lies, claims that Isaiah was paid by foreign groups, that the summit was inciting violence. She and Zara worked furiously, flagging fake posts and amplifying real voices from attendees. On the second day, a local news van arrived, its reporter pushing for an interview. Isaiah agreed, but the questions were sharp, laced with accusations. Some say you're exploiting your story for fame, the reporter said, her eyes narrowing. How do you respond? Isaiah took a breath, his mother's words echoing. Stay steady. I'm here because I was a kid on a plane, holding a Bible, and someone thought that was a threat. I'm here so no one else has to feel that way. The reporter faltered, and the crowd behind Isaiah cheered. The moment went viral, drowning out the bots. But that night, as he left the auditorium, a black SUV trailed him and Miguel to their hotel. Miguel noticed first. That's not random, he whispered. We need to move. Isaiah's heart pounded as they ducked into a side street, the SUV's headlights sweeping past. Miguel called a friend, who picked them up in an unmarked car. Back at the hotel, Zara hacked into traffic cams, identifying the SUV's plates as registered to a private security firm with ties to the same network Vance had funded. They're not done with you, she said. But I've got their digital fingerprints now. Angela Brooks flew to LA, filing an injunction against the firm for stalking. The summit continued, its momentum unstoppable. On the final day, Isaiah introduced a new initiative. The Unity Scholars Fund, a national extension of his program, aimed at training young leaders to combat bias and disinformation. He dedicated it to his mother, who watched from the front row, tears in her eyes. Back at Morehouse, Isaiah felt the weight of the summit's success and its costs. The threats hadn't stopped, and his grades were slipping under the strain. One night, alone in his dorm, he opened his Bible to Psalm 27. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? He wrote in the margin. For the kids who come after me. Aisha, now a close friend, stopped by with coffee. You're doing too much, she said, echoing Tanya. Let us carry some of this. Isaiah smiled, weary but determined. I'm learning, he said. But I'm not stopping. The next morning he got a call from Miguel. A new group in LA wanted to join the Unity Scholars. You started something, man, Miguel said. It's bigger than you now. Isaiah looked out his window, the city waking under a soft dawn. He didn't have all the answers, but he had faith in God, in his people, in the fight. And that was enough. Isaiah Carter stood in the Morehouse College chapel, the stained glass windows casting fractured light across the pews. At 19, he was no longer just a student or an activist. He was a beacon for the Unity Scholars Fund, now a national network with chapters in 10 cities. His Bible, its spine creased from years of use, rested in his hands as he prepared to speak to a new group of Carter scholars. But the weight of leadership felt heavier than ever. The Unity Scholars' success had drawn attention, not all of it welcome. A rift was growing within the organization. Some of the newer chapter leaders, particularly in Chicago and Detroit, argued that Isaiah's focus on faith-based activism alienated non-religious members. At a recent virtual meeting, a Chicago leader named Malik had been blunt. "We need to be inclusive, Isaiah. Not everyone's carrying a Bible." Isaiah understood the critique, but it stung. His faith wasn't just personal. It was the foundation of his courage, from that fateful flight to every battle since. Still he listened, promising to broaden the group's messaging. But the tension lingered, and whispers of a splinter group forming reached him through Aisha, who'd become his right hand in managing the network's social media. "They're calling it Unity Now," Aisha said over coffee at a campus cafe. "They want a secular version of what we're doing. Malik's leading it, and he's got followers." Isaiah frowned, stirring his coffee. "We're stronger together. Why split us up?" Aisha shrugged. "Some folks think you're too visible. They want the movement to outgrow you." The words hit hard. Isaiah had never sought the spotlight, but it had found him. Now, it threatened to fracture what he'd built. The next challenge came unexpectedly. A major foundation, the Horizon Institute, offered a $2 million grant to expand the Unity Scholars Fund, but with conditions. They wanted Isaiah to step back as the public face, citing his polarizing image after the airline incident and subsequent exposés. They also pushed for a more corporate structure, with less emphasis on grassroots activism. Isaiah met with Pastor James and Angela Brooks in Atlanta to discuss the offer. "This could fund scholarships for hundreds of kids," Angela said, her lawyer's pragmatism clear. "But they're trying to control the narrative. You'd lose your voice." Pastor James leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Isaiah, you started this with nothing but faith and a phone call. Money's nice, but it's not the mission." Isaiah nodded, but the decision gnawed at him. Rejecting the grant could stall the program's growth. Accepting it might betray its soul. He turned to Zara, who'd been quietly tracking the Horizon Institute's ties. "They're not clean," she said, her laptop screen glowing with financial records. "The Institute's board has links to the same shell companies that funded Vance's network. They're not offering you a grant. They're buying you out." The revelation clarified things. Isaiah declined the grant, but the move sparked backlash. Malik and the Unity Now faction used it as ammunition, accusing Isaiah of prioritizing ego over progress. On X, posts questioning his leadership gained traction, some suspiciously amplified by bots. Zara traced them to remnants of the old network, still lurking in the shadows. The fracture came to a head at the Unity Scholars' second national summit, held in Miami. Isaiah arrived with Tanya, Aisha, and Miguel, hoping to unify the chapters. The auditorium buzzed with energy, but tension simmered. Malik took the stage first, pitching Unity Now as a broader, more inclusive alternative. His charisma drew cheers, but his words cut at Isaiah, framing him as a figure of the past. When Isaiah spoke, he didn't hold back. "This movement started because I refused to be silenced," he said, his Bible raised. "Faith got me here, but this isn't about me. It's about us. Every kid who's been told they don't belong. We don't need to split up to be strong. We need to stand together." The crowd was divided, some clapping, others murmuring. Then a young scholar from Detroit, a shy girl named Kira, stood up. "I joined because of Isaiah," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "He showed me I could fight back without losing who I am. We don't need a new name. We need each other." Her words shifted the room. Malik's confident smile faltered, and by the summit's end, most chapters reaffirmed their commitment to the Unity Scholars Fund. Malik agreed to stay, but the rift left scars. As the summit closed, Zara pulled Isaiah aside. "We've got a problem," she said, showing him the encrypted file she'd intercepted. It detailed a plan to target the Unity scholars with a smear campaign, linking them to fabricated extremist ties. The source? A shadowy group called the Vanguard Alliance, with ties to the same security firm that had trailed Isaiah in LA. They're coming for the whole movement now, Zara warned. Not just you. Isaiah's jaw tightened. He called an emergency meeting with his core team: Tanya, Pastor James, Angela, Aisha, and Miguel. They agreed to go on the offensive, using Zara's evidence to expose the Vanguard Alliance before it could strike. Angela filed a federal complaint, while Aisha crafted a social media campaign to rally public support. Miguel reached out to grassroots groups in Miami, building a coalition to protect the scholars. The campaign worked. The Vanguard Alliance's plans unraveled as journalists picked up the story, and the Unity Scholars Fund emerged stronger, with new allies and donors stepping in to replace the Horizon grant. But Isaiah felt the toll. Late one night, alone in his dorm, he opened his Bible to James 1:2-3. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. He wrote in the margin, for the flame that refines us. Tanya, sensing his exhaustion, flew to Atlanta. Over dinner, she looked at him with fierce love. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore, she said. You're carrying a generation. But you're still my son. Rest when you need to. Isaiah nodded, a small smile breaking through. I will, Mama, but not yet. The next day, he got a call from Kira, the Detroit scholar. We're starting a new chapter, she said, her voice bright. And we want you to visit. Show us how to keep going. Isaiah looked at his Bible, then out at the city, its lights a constellation of possibility. I'm on my way, he said. Isaiah Carter stepped off the plane in Detroit, his Bible tucked into his backpack, its familiar weight grounding him. The Unity Scholars Fund had grown into a movement, with Kira's new chapter in Detroit marking its 15th city. At 19, Isaiah was no longer just a symbol. He was a mentor, a strategist, and, to some, a target. The invitation to speak at the chapter's launch felt like a chance to rebuild momentum after the Miami summit's tensions. But the weight of expectations pressed harder than ever. Kira met him at the airport, her shy demeanor replaced by quiet confidence. The kids here are ready, she said, leading him to a community center in a struggling neighborhood. But some folks aren't happy we're organizing. We've had flyers torn down, even a break-in. Isaiah's jaw tightened. Same playbook as before? Kira nodded. Feels like it. But we're not backing down. The launch event was electric, packed with teens, parents, and local activists. Isaiah spoke of resilience, weaving his faith into stories of the movement's victories. The world will try to dim your light, he said, holding up his Bible. But you decide how bright it burns. The crowd erupted, but Isaiah noticed a group of older men in the back, their faces hard, watching him too closely. That night, at a local diner, Kira introduced Isaiah to her mentor, Reverend Clara Tate, a wiry woman in her 60s, with a voice that carried the weight of decades in activism. Clara was blunt. You're doing good work, Isaiah, but you're young. Movements eat their leaders if they don't pace themselves. You ever think about stepping back? The question hit like a punch. Isaiah had faced threats, betrayal, and exhaustion, but stepping back felt like surrender. People need me, he said. I can't just walk away. Clara's eyes softened. You're not a savior, son. You're human. Even Moses needed. Aaron, her words lingered as Isaiah returned to his hotel. Alone, he opened his Bible to Exodus, reading about Moses' doubts and burdens. For the first time, he wondered if he was enough. His grades at Morehouse were slipping, his sleep fractured by nightmares of planes and shadowed figures. Tanya's calls, always a lifeline, now carried a new worry. She'd been diagnosed with hypertension, likely from the stress of his activism. When he called her, her voice was firm. I'm fine, Isaiah. Focus on you. Don't carry me too. But he couldn't help it. The movement, his mother, the kids like Kira, it all rested on his shoulders. And then came the news that tipped the balance. Zara's encrypted message arrived at 2 a.m. Check your email. Urgent. Attached was a leaked audio file, grainy but clear. It was Malik, the Chicago leader who'd nearly split the Unity Scholars. In Miami, he was speaking to a reporter, claiming Isaiah had mishandled funds, funneling donations for personal gain. The accusations were false, but the damage was immediate. X posts spread the story, amplified by the same bot networks Zara had tracked before. Isaiah's hands shook as he called Aisha. How did this happen? He asked. Malik knows we're Clean, Aisha's voice was tense. He's jealous, Isaiah. You're the face of this, and he wants it for himself. I'm working on a response, but we need to prove the money's clean. Fast. Angela Brooks joined the call, her tone all business. I've got our financials audited and ready. But this isn't just Malik. Someone's backing him. Someone with money. My guess? The Vanguard Alliance is still pulling strings. Isaiah felt the walls closing in. The movement he'd built was under attack, and now his integrity was in question. He turned to Pastor James, who'd flown to Detroit after the news broke. What do I do? Isaiah asked, his voice raw. James placed a hand on his shoulder. You face it. Truth's on your side. But you need real help. Not just us. The help came from an unlikely source. At the Detroit Community Center, a man approached Isaiah after a workshop. He was in his 40s, with a crisp suit and a cautious smile. I'm David Ramsey, he said. I used to work for the Horizon Institute. Isaiah tensed. The Horizon Institute had tried to buy out the Unity Scholars months ago. What do you want? He asked. David lowered his voice. I left when I saw what they were doing, funding groups like the Vanguard Alliance to silence people like you. I have records, emails, transactions, names. I want to help. Skeptical, Isaiah brought David to Clara and Zara. Zara vetted him, hacking into his digital trail to confirm his story. He's legit, she said. He's got dirt that could bury the Alliance for good. David's evidence was a goldmine. Proof that the Horizon Institute had bankrolled Malik's smear campaign, along with plans to discredit other activists. Angela used it to file a federal lawsuit, while Aisha and Kira launched a counter-campaign. On X, sharing the Unity Scholars' audited financials and David's leaks. The narrative shifted, with Mar's Truth for Unity trending as supporters rallied. Malik issued a public apology, claiming he'd been misled, but the damage was done. He stepped down, and the Chicago chapter reaffirmed its loyalty to Isaiah. The Vanguard Alliance's leaders faced indictments, their network crumbling under the weight of David's evidence. The Unity Scholars Fund emerged stronger, with new safeguards to protect its mission. But Isaiah was changed. The betrayal, the pressure, and Tanya's health scare forced him to confront his limits. He met with Clara in the chapel, her words from before echoing. I'm tired, he admitted. Not of the fight, but of carrying it all. Clara nodded. Then share it. Train others to lead. Your faith got you here. Let it guide you to rest. Isaiah took her advice. He appointed Kira and Aisha as co-directors of the Unity Scholars, giving them authority to expand the movement. He focused on his studies, carving out time for Tanya, who was managing her health with medication and rest. Months later, Isaiah stood at a Unity Scholars rally in Atlanta, watching Kira speak to a crowd of thousands. Her voice carried the same fire he'd once felt, her words inspiring a new generation. Tanya, beside him, squeezed his hand. You built this, she said. He smiled, his Bible in his pocket, its pages now marked with a new verse, Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him. In the margin he wrote, for the ones who carry the flame. As the crowd cheered, Isaiah felt a quiet peace. The fight wasn't over, but he wasn't alone. The movement was bigger than him now, a beacon burning bright in the storm. Isaiah Carter sat in his Morehouse dorm, the faint glow of his laptop illuminating his Bible, open to Isaiah 61. The Spirit of the Lord is on me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. At 20, he was a junior, balancing studies with his role as a mentor for the Unity Scholars Fund, now a thriving network with chapters across the U.S. Kira and Aisha had taken on much of the leadership, but Isaiah remained the movement's heart, a symbol of resilience born from a single moment on a plane. An email from the Global Youth Alliance, an international coalition based in London, changed everything. They invited Isaiah to speak at their annual conference in Johannesburg, South Africa, a gathering of young activists from over 50 countries. The theme, Voices of Tomorrow, aligned perfectly with the Unity Scholars mission. But the invitation came with a challenge. Isaiah would need to present a global vision for youth-led justice, connecting his story to struggles worldwide. Tanya, visiting for dinner, read the email with a mix of pride and worry. South Africa? She said, setting down her fork. That's a long way, Isaiah. And you're still recovering from last year's mess. He nodded, thinking of the smears, the threats, and her health scare. I know, Mama. But this is bigger than me. Kids over there are fighting the same battles, different names, same game. She sighed, her eyes soft. Then take someone with you. You don't need to do this alone. Isaiah recruited Kira and Zara for the trip. Kira, now a confident leader in the Detroit chapter, brought her knack for connecting with youth, while Zara's cybersecurity skills were crucial for navigating the global stage safely. Pastor James and Angela Brooks stayed behind to manage the U.S. chapters, but Aisha insisted on joining remotely, ready to counter any online attacks. Zara's pre-trip research uncovered risks. The conference is high profile, she warned during a planning call. Some groups, local and international, don't like outsiders stirring things up. There's chatter about protests, maybe worse. And the Vanguard Alliance? They've got contacts in South Africa too. Isaiah's stomach tightened, but his resolve held. We've faced this before. We'll be ready. Tanya, though reluctant, agreed to let him go, on one condition. He check in daily. I'm not losing you to some international nonsense, she said, her voice firm but warm. Johannesburg buzzed with energy, its skyline a mix of glass towers and vibrant street markets. The conference, held in a sprawling convention center, drew thousands. Teens from Soweto, activists from Nairobi, students from London, all united by a hunger for change. Isaiah felt a kinship with them, their stories of systemic injustice echoing his own. On the opening day, he took the stage, his Bible in hand. I'm here because of a slap on a plane, he began, his voice steady. But I stayed because of you, because every one of us deserves a voice no matter where we're from. He spoke of the Unity scholars, linking their fight to global struggles. Apartheid's legacy in South Africa, police violence in Brazil, censorship in Asia. The crowd roared, but outside, protests brewed. Some genuine, others orchestrated, their signs accusing the conference of foreign interference. Kira, watching from the wings, whispered, "They're trying to drown us out." Isaiah nodded. "Let's give them something louder." Midway through the conference, a young South African activist named Thandi approached Isaiah. She was 19, with a fierce gaze and a scar across her cheek from a protest clash. "Your story's big here," she said, "but some locals think you're just an American showboat. I know you're not. I want to help." Thandi's connections ran deep. Community organizers, student leaders, even a few sympathetic journalists. She introduced Isaiah to her network, who shared stories of their own. Land disputes, education barriers, and lingering racial divides. Isaiah saw parallels to his own fight, but also differences that humbled him. "I'm not here to lead you," he told them. "I'm here to learn." Thandi's group joined forces with the Unity scholars, planning a joint rally to close the conference. But Zara's alerts grew urgent. The Vanguard Alliance's local allies were planning to disrupt the rally, using hired agitators to spark chaos and discredit the activists. "They want a riot," Zara said, showing Isaiah intercepted messages. "And they want you blamed." The rally was held in a Soweto township, a sea of banners and voices under a blazing sun. Isaiah, Kira, and Thandi led the march, chanting for justice and unity. Thousands joined, their energy electric. But as they reached a community square, a group of agitators, some in plain clothes, others posing as protesters, began shoving and shouting slurs. Cameras rolled, ready to frame the chaos as the activists fought. Isaiah climbed onto a makeshift stage, his Bible raised. "Don't let them divide us," he shouted. "We're here for peace, for justice, for each other." His voice cut through the noise, calming the crowd. Thandi and Kira rallied local leaders, who separated the agitators before violence could erupt. Zara, monitoring from a nearby van, hacked into the agitators' communications, exposing their orders live on X. The crowd cheered as the truth spread, and police, pressured by the public outcry, detained the troublemakers. The rally ended in triumph, with Isaiah and Thandi embracing on stage, their shared vision a beacon for the global youth. Back at their hotel, Isaiah sat with Kira and Thandi, exhausted but alive with purpose. "You didn't just speak," Thandi said. "You showed us how to stand." Kira nodded. "And you showed me I can lead too." Isaiah smiled, but his thoughts turned to Tanya. He called her, her voice a lifeline across the ocean. "You okay, son?" she asked. "Better than okay," he said. "I'm finding my way." That night, he opened his Bible to Psalm 119:105. "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path." In the margin, he wrote, "For the voices that echo beyond borders." The Johannesburg Conference sparked a global wave for the Unity scholars, with new chapters forming in South Africa, Brazil, and Kenya. Isaiah returned to Morehouse, his focus sharper. He delegated more to Kira and Aisha, trusting their leadership, and began working with Thandi to build an international coalition. The Vanguard Alliance's influence waned, but Isaiah knew the fight was far from over. As he walked across campus, his Bible in his backpack, he felt a quiet strength. The world was vast, the challenges endless, but he wasn't alone. His faith, his family, and his allies, old and new, carried him forward, a flame that would not fade. Isaiah Carter returned to Atlanta from Johannesburg, his heart full, but his body weary. At 20, he was a junior at Morehouse College, and the Unity Scholars Fund had become a global movement, with chapters in 15 countries and thousands of young activists carrying its mission. His Bible, its pages now a tapestry of notes and verses, remained his anchor. But the weight of leadership had carved lines into his young face. The Johannesburg rally had been a triumph, but it also exposed the Unity scholars to new enemies, groups who saw their growing influence as a threat to entrenched power. Tanya greeted him at the airport, her smile warm but her eyes searching. "You look tired, son," she said, pulling him into a hug. "You've done enough for a lifetime." "Not yet, Mama," Isaiah replied, though his voice lacked its usual fire. The truth was, the constant battles against the Vanguard Alliance, internal rifts, and now international scrutiny were wearing him down. He'd promised Tanya he'd rest, but rest felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Back at Morehouse, Kira and Aisha met him with updates. The global chapters were thriving, but a new challenge loomed. A coalition of conservative media outlets, backed by remnants of the Vanguard Alliance, was pushing a narrative that the Unity scholars were radicalizing youth. They'd lobbied for investigations into the group's funding, claiming ties to extremist organizations. A lie, but one gaining traction. "We've got the financials to prove them wrong," Aisha said, her laptop open to spreadsheets. "But this is bigger than bots now. They're going after our credibility." Zara, joining via video call, added, "They've got a new player. Some think tank called the Liberty Front. They're slick, well-funded, and they're targeting you, Isaiah. They want to make you the face of their scare campaign." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Then we face them. One last time." The Liberty Front's campaign hit hard. News segments painted Isaiah as a divisive figure, twisting his plane incident into a story of entitlement and disruption. Posts, amplified by coordinated accounts, called for boycotts of Unity Scholars events. The pressure took a toll on the movement, with some chapters losing donors and volunteers. Isaiah called a global summit, this time virtual, to rally the network. He reached out to Thandi in South Africa, Miguel in LA, and Kira, who'd become a powerhouse in Detroit. "We're not just fighting for ourselves," he told them. "We're fighting for every kid who's ever been told they don't matter. We don't back down now." With Angela Brooks' legal expertise, they prepared a counteroffensive. Zara and David Ramsey, the former Horizon Institute insider, dug into the Liberty Front's funding, uncovering ties to the same shell companies that had backed Councilman Vance years ago. Aisha crafted a media campaign, using testimonials from Unity scholars to drown out the lies. Thandi mobilized international support, with allies in Africa and Europe sharing the movement's story. The decisive moment came at a televised town hall in Atlanta, hosted by a neutral news outlet. The Liberty Front sent a polished spokesperson, Dr. Ellen Carver, to debate Isaiah. She was sharp, accusing the Unity scholars of sowing division and exploiting youth for political gain. The audience, a mix of supporters and skeptics, watched intently. Isaiah took the stage, his Bible in hand, his voice steady. "I'm not here to divide," he said. "I'm here because I was a kid on a plane, holding this book, and someone thought that was a crime. The Unity scholars aren't about me, they're about us, about justice, about truth. You can't scare that away." He shared stories of the scholars, Kira's work in Detroit schools, Thandi's fight for land rights, Miguel's community organizing, He presented Zara's evidence, exposing the Liberty Front's ties to corrupt networks. The audience erupted, and Carver faltered, her arguments crumbling under the weight of truth. The town hall shifted public perception. The Liberty Front's campaign collapsed as sponsors pulled out, and the Unity Scholars Fund secured new funding from grassroots donors and international allies. The movement was safe, for now. Isaiah knew the victory wasn't the end. The world would always push back against change, and he couldn't carry the fight forever. At a Unity Scholars retreat in Georgia, he made a decision. Surrounded by Kira, Aisha, Thandi, and dozens of young leaders, he announced a new structure, a council of regional directors with Kira as chair. "You don't need me to lead anymore," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the movement now." The scholars protested, but Isaiah held firm. "I'm not leaving," he said. "I'm just stepping back. I'll mentor, I'll support, but it's your turn to shine." That night, he sat with Tanya on their porch, the Atlanta skyline glowing in the distance. "You did good, son," she said, her health now stable, her pride evident. "You built something that'll outlast you." Isaiah smiled, his Bible open to Philippians 4:13. "I can do all this through him who gives me strength." In the margin, he wrote, "For the flame that never fades." Years later, Isaiah graduated from Morehouse with honors, his degree in political science a stepping stone to law school. The Unity Scholars Fund thrived under Kira's leadership, with chapters in 30 countries and a legacy of empowering youth. Isaiah became a lawyer, like Angela, defending those silenced by injustice. He married Aisha, their partnership rooted in shared purpose, and they raised a daughter, named Clara, after the Reverend who taught him to share the load. The threats never fully stopped, but Isaiah had learned to live with them, his faith unshaken. He kept his Bible close, its pages a map of his journey, from a slapped teen on a plane to a man who'd sparked a global movement. At a final Unity Scholars event, he spoke to a new generation, his daughter watching from the crowd. "You don't have to be perfect," he told them. "You just have to be faithful, to your truth, to your people, to the fight. That's enough to change the world." As he stepped down, the crowd chanted his name. But Isaiah's eyes were on his daughter, her small hand clutching a Bible of her own. The flame he'd carried had spread, and it would burn on, carried by countless hands across borders and time. The end.